Hi, I'm Caitlin, and this is my channel. I actually share this channel with my friend Anna, so I'm really excited to do future videos with her. I'm a college student, as well as my friend, and we've been wanting to do something like this for a while now. We had this TikTok where we would animate ourselves talking about books, because we both love books and whatnot, and it just really didn't work. Because it took so much time. So we're now doing it just with recording ourselves and talking. So yeah, I'm really excited. Today I actually wanted to talk about my freshman year and what books I read during my freshman year. As a community, sometimes it's hard to talk about reading books because people say like, oh, I've read like 100 books in 1 year or something. And that's just really not achievable, especially for college students like myself. So I wanted to show that it's okay not reading a lot of books. For me, what I found is that the way I stop myself from feeling burnt out is by reading books. Because my major is very reading heavy, I had to read all the time for classes. And the kind of monotony with reading, I would just get really tired. And so in fall term, I didn't really read that much at all. But I noticed that I was on my phone all the time and just like watching things and just doing random stuff and like not really doing anything productive. And I started to feel really bad about myself. So I started reading again, and I actually noticed that doing that every day, just reading like a couple chapters or maybe like 20 to 30 pages at night, was the perfect way for me to like wind down my day and not really think about classes or anything. So I started doing that, and I wanted to share with you the books that I read that were either really, really good or really, really entertaining. Like I said, in my fall term, I only read one book, and it's technically cheating because I started it in the summer, but it's Uprooted by Naomi Novik, and it was really good. It's a young adult fantasy where there's this wood in this world that has like kind of a character of its own, which I think is really interesting. And so there's these sorcerers and witches and wizards that kind of all have a play in the world, and they're trying to defeat the wood because the wood is like the natural enemy. And so the main girl, I'm gonna totally butcher her name, I'm sorry.
Agnieszka.
She is chosen to live with the dragon, I almost said the dragon warrior, with the dragon wizard. And it's kind of like, it's a chosen thing. He's like immortal or really, really old. She's a number of the generation of girls that have to do it. So it's like every generation this happens. I really liked the book. I wish I kind of read it like more consistently, because I started it and then I read maybe a good like 60%, but then I did not touch it for weeks. And then I kind of forgot all about it, and it was right at the climax. So the ending of the book didn't have as heavy of it didn't leave as heavy of a mark on me as the beginning did. I still think it was really good. The person who lent it to me, actually, she read it in like 4 days on a vacation that we were both on. Sorry, that light like randomly turns on. Of course it had to do that now. So this was actually the copy that we both read with, and there was like these sprinklers that would come on during like the evening, and we didn't know about it, and so the sprinklers got on the book, which was kind of funny. But it was a good read. I think it would have been more fun to read it more consistently instead of forget a lot of the plot and stuff, but I have a P for a brain, so this is now the winter term section where I actually read a lot. I don't know if that's because it was like dreary and stuff and I didn't really do anything, but I didn't really do anything in fall term either. Don't feel bad if like you don't get invited to parties and stuff, because if you're an incoming freshman and if you like don't get invited to parties, it's fine. You don't have to. I had a lot of fun reading books in my room. Yay. With reading, it was creating pockets of me time, which I really appreciated. And I don't feel like I would have had that if I was just on my phone. There's a difference between reading and just being on your phone, for me at least, because I feel like with reading, I'm still being a part of something bigger. And if I'm just on my phone, then I don't know. I just feel like I'm wasting what precious college time I have left, or what precious time I have left. Let me preface this. Most colleges run in semesters, but my college runs in quarter terms. So there's fall, winter, spring, and summer. This was around like January, February, March. But for winter and spring term, the way I'm going to break up these books is tell you the best of them and then save the worst for last, because I don't know, I think the worst for last is always kind of funny. I put it at the bottom again. Okay, so the first book I read in winter term, and probably the best book I read during college, was Juniper and Thorn by Ava Reid. Oh, so good. I don't know how to recommend it more. So Juniper and Thorn is a gothic retelling from the Brothers Grimm about the juniper tree. I haven't read the Juniper Tree, but I feel like I should. It follows the story of a powerful wizard and his daughters, especially the youngest one. What is her name? She's trying to find her way in the world, but also trying to find the balance between her and her power and what it means. Her father's pretty controlling, and it's a very dark, gothic environment, which is heavily inspired from Eastern European and Russian mythology. I thought it was really interesting to read something like this because I've never read something like this before. Ava Reid's other book, which is also quite popular, is The Wolf and the Huntsman, and this was actually set in the same world, which was really interesting. I read The Wolf and the Huntsman more recently, so I'm excited to reread Juniper and Thorn and see the similarities or what is there that I didn't see before. I will say, though, this book is very graphic. There's a lot of very dark and graphic descriptions. I have learned the hard way to make sure to talk about the graphicness of books, because I recommended this to a friend and she did not like it because she's not really a fan of dark stuff. So if you are a fan of more gothic, creepy, thriller-esque, where the character is definitely struggling and doesn't go through some nice things, then I would heavily recommend it. But it's totally good if you don't like that type of stuff. Ava Reid has done a lot of other books that are also amazing. But I would heavily recommend to check it out. I read this in a week at school, which I was really busy in my freshman year, so it was surprising when I read books in under a week or two. It only happened actually it happened more often than I thought it did, but compared to high school or even before, when it would take me months to read a book, this was really incredible for me. Okay, next I actually read on my Kindle, so I don't have a physical copy with me, but it's The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I know it's a pretty old classic, and it's definitely something that I feel like everyone should read or at least know about, but I hadn't had the chance to read it yet. I think it's very important to talk about this book, especially in today's climate, societal climate, and it was important for me to read it as someone who just freshly turned 18 and who could legally vote and whatnot. This is what I'm saying. I am plugging votelikeabeast.com into my video because I think it is important for everyone who is over the age of 18 to vote in America. This is a really great resource. You can check if you're registered. You can do a lot of your readings to become socially aware and be able to choose who you're voting for more carefully. This classic from Margaret Atwood is a dystopian where it is a heavily governmented patriarchal society where people are put into their places socially and they are forced to work into certain things like factions. Not like Divergent. Don't think about Divergent. That's such a I hate that Divergent tainted the word factions because it's such a good way to describe things in dystopian, but Divergent just, God, it's awful. If you want a hate video about me hating about Divergent, let me know. It follows the main character, Offred, who works as a fertile concubine, basically, for this high political family because the wife is infertile. So basically her entire life and being gets boiled down to her reproductive value. Yay. Like I said, please vote. Every vote counts. And especially in younger demographics, we really need to make sure our vote is heard. So the next book that I read was My Annihilation by Fuminori Nakamura, and it was translated by Sam Bett. This was so good. I don't actually want to tell you a whole lot about it. I just want to read to you what I knew about it, which was on the back. Turn this page and you may forfeit your entire life. With My Annihilation, Fuminori Nakamura, master of literary noir, has constructed a puzzle box of narrative in the form of a confessional diary that implicates its reader in a heinous crime. Delving relentlessly into the darkest corners of human consciousness, My Annihilation interrogates the unspeakable thoughts all humans share that can be monstrous when brought to life, revealing with disturbing honesty the psychological motives of a killer. I promise I'm not dyslexic. This book was incredible. I think I read it in like 2 days at school. I've never really been a big fan of psychological thrillers. I've never really read any of them, but this totally changed the ballgame for me. I am wanting to read so much more of them. I heavily recommend this book. Very quick read. And I honestly don't think you should know anything going into it except for the blurb on the back. So the next book that I read was in winter term. This is still winter term. The next book that I read was Daisy Jones and the Six. I actually listened to it with an audiobook, so it was a little bit different. I used to listen to a lot of audiobooks when I was younger, but I stopped doing that when I got older. So I got through this pretty quickly, but it was so good. This follows band members getting interviewed about when they were together in this 60s, 70s rock band in the 60s and 70s, and them talking about all the drama that happened and whatnot. I'm a really big fan of classic rock from like the 60s and 70s and whatnot, so I came into it a little apprehensive. I didn't really know how it would be portrayed. This really was something that was super interesting for me. And I think, honestly, reading it with an audiobook is a really good choice. I'm not a huge fan of audiobooks anymore as I used to be, but this one was different because they used a really big cast of people to narrate. So when you went to every single person's point of view, because this was more like an epistolary novel, kind of, because they were interviews. When it was set up in interviews like that, all of the characters have different voices and they had different ways of speaking, which made it sound so much more real. And it also helped me because I'm really bad with names and characters. So when you get like 20 new characters at once, my brain just can't work with that. So it's not great. The next book that I read in the winter term was The Cat Who Saved Books by Sosuke Natsukawa and translated by Louise Heel Kawai. It's a story about a young boy who loses his grandfather and he inherits this bookstore from him where magical stuff happens. There's this cat that comes in and he tells the boy that he must help save the books who are in peril from unloving masters, and it was a really good read. It dealt with grief in a very interesting way. I really liked it. Something that kind of bugged me though was the way that they kind of blazed through certain scenes. I wish it was more thought out. Kind of reminded me of a movie in that type of movement of the story, but it didn't really work for a book. I mean, it's short, but it didn't work in the same way that it works for a movie. Okay, so these last two books that I read in the winter term were, well, they're famous. I picked them because I was bored. I'm a glutton for punishment, so I like to have fun. What's the problem with that? I like to have fun. I want to preface though, I have two different categories of how I rate books. It's if I liked it, if it was well written, and if I had fun reading it. Books can be both of them. They could be one or the other. They can be neither of them at all. While I have my gripes about certain books, I can still have a lot of fun with them. And I think that's why people like rant reviews, because it's still really fun to talk about these things. So, the two books that I read in my fall term that I would not rate highly on effects of good, but I would rate highly on my own personal entertainment, were Fourth Wing and Crave. If you don't know those books, that's okay. I'm not really I don't really want to go into them for like this video, because that would be a lot for just like a book or two. But just for like a little background information, Crave is basically like Twilight. It's a little bit different, and Fourth Wing is Fourth Wing. Basically like dragons and academies and tall men and weak, fragile girls that get the biggest dragons. I had a lot of fun reading these books. I had a lot of fun ranting about these books with my friends. I had a lot of fun piecing them apart and getting frustrated with them when they were weird. So I don't blame you if you loved these books. I loved them, but in my own way. And I think that's totally valid because I had fun. So now we're on to spring term. I actually read 2 books during spring break, but that doesn't really count because I wasn't disassociating from my work. They were okay. I mean, I read oh shit, hold on. I have to get the book. I read Romanoff by Nadine Brands. I don't know, I got this book for like $2 at like a retail bookstore, which is kind of cool. It was good. I was entertained, and the writing was okay, and it's based on the incidents that happened with the Romanoff family. It was okay. It just had it had more magic in it, which was really cool. But something that I didn't really feel comfortable with was that I associate Anastasia, who's the main character of this book, I associate her with a child, basically, because she was one. And I know a little bit about the story of what happened with this. So I was a little bit uncomfortable when there was a romantic character and he was like a guard. Like, they did age her up, but still a historical character having like such a big impact on the story, and it's just like, oh, we just aged her up. I don't know, it felt kind of weird. When I did get back to school, one of the first things I read was Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. So good. I love it. It's crazy amazing. It is so long, though. I don't know how to describe it. I want to make a future video about dude fantasy, because this is not a derogatory thing or anything, but it's this like certain genre of fantasy where it's mass print, super dense, super small books that are really cool with the writing and whatnot. And like, they're not all written by guys. Like, I'm thinking like Tales from Earthsea. That's another author that I'm like kind of putting into dude fantasy at the moment. It's just high fantasy, like Lord of the Rings and Earthsea and whatnot. I loved Mistborn. I thought it was super cool. This is actually the first book I've read from Brandon Sanderson. He's done other things, of course. This is the first one in his Mistborn trilogy, and I don't know how that fits into the full series. It's long, and I don't quite know a lot about it, so can't wait to see what I got myself into. Mistborn is about a ragtag group of rebellious people who are trying to raise a coup against the kind of immortal, omnipresent overlord of like a very dystopian society. It's a time and true classic storyline. I love that type of story personally, but I think the thing that makes Mistborn stand out is not necessarily the plot that it chooses to use, but the world building and the magic elements. Mistborn uses this type of magic that uses metals. So people can ingest different types of metals, and then that will help them use a certain ability that comes with. Usually people can only use 1 or 2 of the metals. I think usually only 1, but there are a group of people that are born that can use all of them, and those are called Mistborn. It's still amazing, and the world building is also incredible, and the way that he describes things is really awesome, I think. I really like it, and I'm excited to read more. I'm slowly piecing apart the second book. It's really long, and it's really stressful, honestly. So I don't know how much I'll read of that at school, because I like reading lower intelligence books at school, so I don't have to stress out about it. And then like, I save my literary fiction for summer. So the next book I read was The Grace Year by Kim Liggett. I have been trying to read this book since freshman year of high school. I would get maybe this much into it, and then I would stop reading it. I don't know why. It was really good. I was really excited to read it, but just as soon as I hit like a certain page count, I was just like clocked out, and I would never finish it. And it was always like a library book, so I would always have to return it. And I remember my librarian at school said I had to like have a sit down to read this book because I was younger and it's pretty dark. I brought it with me to school and I read it like in a day. It's about another like dystopian patriarchal society where these kind of cultish people live in this village that's very antiquated, and every cycle where like the girls come of age, they have to get rid of their magic by sending them in the middle of a lake. There's like an island. I don't want to spoil too much, so I won't say too much. The one thing I would say I didn't quite like about this was that the romance in it was slow building at first, which I love a slow building romance, but it was really slow and then it picked up immediately. And for me, that's not it. Especially in a situation where she's like young and like she's getting like married off and shit. I think she was like 15 or something. Having that kind of ideal forced upon you, like this is your true love. Oh, my books fell. I'm now going into the books that I read for fun. So the first one I read was Shatter Me. Yeah, Shatter Me. I think I missed the age bracket for when I was supposed to read this book. I feel like when I was reading other books like Matched and The Selection, I feel like that's when this book would have been like super amazing for me. And something that I really hated about this was that I feel like they just like ripped the last 25% of the book away from me. Like I was like finishing it and they were like, okay, let's all round up to defeat the guy, and then it stopped. I was like, what? Nothing else? I just really didn't like that. The next book was Bride by Ali Hazelwood. I thought it was actually pretty good. It was the first Ali Hazelwood book that I've read, and I will read more. I just don't think it was really my vibe. I really like supernatural elements and whatnot, but something that annoys me is there was a child in the book, and she was like, I think around 7 or 8. And she did not act like a 7 or 8 year old. She acted like a 4 to 5 year old, like messing up words and being like, oops, ditzy me. I was taking TikTok by Kesha when I was 7, and like 7-year-olds nowadays are like doing skincare. And I don't think 7-year-olds are really messing up words. So I always feel like that really pulls me out when a child character, obviously not aged correctly, that's just a no-go for me. Hi. So this is totally the same day. That was all of the books that I read in freshman year that helped me get through some pretty rough patches. I know I didn't say a lot when I was reviewing them, but being able to escape into them was something that I was truly grateful for. I'm still in summer right now, actually. I go back to school in a couple of weeks, so I'll be doing a summer reading wrap-up eventually. I don't know when. It will be sometime though. But yeah, that's all. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.